From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
So you might possibly have heard about the minister that was giving a sermon on the evils of drinking alcohol, and he was concluding in a very emotional way his lesson with the thunderous statement, "I hope the time will come where all the liquor will be poured into the river." Now, let us sing hymn number 94. They opened their hymnals to hymn number 94, which is, "Shall We Gather at the River?" So there is guidance in timing on anything we do in our life, and there's guidance in the timing of any next step. My title today is Taking the Next Step. And I ask, are you ready to take the next step in your life? Are you willing to take the next step in your life? Do you know what the next step is to be taken in your life? Are you listening? Are you being guided as to what that next step may be? We have all had many steps to take in this life, and some are large and some are small. Some happen daily. Some are big moves and changes and what have you. Some of the steps can be internal, be non-linear in the sense that they're not external, they're not objective. They're things that are happening inside you, having to do with your personal growth. So there are steps to take in as we expand and spiritually grow. And then there are other things that are physical, and we live in a physical world, and we may need to move or change this or move to a new home or a new job or whatever the case may be. And of course, these things also, the inner and the outer, overlap and become intertwined. It was Helen Keller that said, "Life is either a great adventure or it is nothing." Life is either a great adventure or it is nothing. And if you have read the life of Helen Keller and know, she had made some incredible steps and strides in her life. Having been born physically blind and deaf, she progressed in a way that was amazing to a place where she, in a sense, was able to see better than many a person because she had gained a sense of insight that was able to be in touch with a higher dimension of herself that brought on a clarity that many a person does not have with their own physical sight. That only comes from something within. But she was able to make these kinds of steps, and she came to the place where she saw, even in spite of the conditions she faced, she saw life as a wondrous adventure, and if it wasn't an adventure, then it's nothing. Very powerful words coming from her. There are vast and expansive dimensions to life that we are all being given the opportunity to experience. They await us. They're here. They're now. And it's for us to really open on into it. There's always a next step. There's always a next step. Some are bigger than others, of course, but it's part of the journey of life. It's part of discovery. It's part of awakening. And all of life is really an awakening process. You know, when you hold the seed of a flower in your hand, is it a seed or is it a flower? What do you see? Actually, its truth is that it is a flower disguised as a seed, and that all it needs is certain conditions to be met, and it will fulfill what is its true nature of being, to grow, to bloom, and to share its gift. Well, you and I have the seed of God within us. And there are certain conditions that are there to be met, that we have choices about and decisions to make and steps to take, whereby you and I are able to go the next step in our blooming, shining our light, being a being of love and light in this world. As the psalmist states, "Order my steps in thy word." What's being said is, bring order to the steps that I am called to take toward truth, toward fulfilling the image and likeness in which I was created. There's always a next step for all of us. We see it in children. You know, you've been around children. You've been a child yourself. My wife and I have been blessed with three children. They're not young anymore, sorry. Yes. Our first child was Dawn. She was born when we were in ministerial school. We were living in a mobile home off campus. And I just remember the process being the first child. And, they can't do much when they're first born. They're, eating, sleeping, wetting, crying, those kinds of things. And but eventually, you lay them on their tummy, and all of a sudden they form an arch and start kicking. They can't go anywhere, but they can lift their head a little bit and see the adventure in their eyes. And then eventually they begin to try to crawl. And it's what I call the kamikaze crawl, because their arms aren't strong enough, and then they fall into the carpet. They bump their head a little bit, but eventually their arms get strong and their legs, and they get it coordinated, and they start crawling, and then they're into everything. The adventure has begun. They're pulling out pans and opening drawers and throwing stuff out, and it's quite the deal, and it's the adventure. And I remember one evening before Dawn, our firstborn, was able to walk, and I was sitting reading a magazine, and she came crawling into and near our coffee table, which is like 18 or 20 inches high. And she came around, and I'm kind of watching out of the corner of the eye, and then she came around there, and all of a sudden I saw one hand and another hand, and then I saw two eyes. And then she popped with a grunt, and all of a sudden I saw a hand and a hand, and she was straining, pulling up. Pretty soon I saw her whole head, and her legs were shaking and straining, and then all of a sudden she was here. Like that. And her eyes went right to me, and we met, and her eyes got big. She giggled, she screamed, she was jubilant. It was like, I stand for something. We all stand for something. What do you stand for? And if you're standing, what's your next step? Because we all have a next step. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It was a moment I'll never forget. And I knew there would be other moments in her life, of course, big moments, where she would go off to school and then off to college and then into a career and into marriage and motherhood and various other things in between, of course. And that's life. There are many, many aspects to life. Even biblically, there are many stories that we could find and use as a reference to this idea of taking the next step. There was Jacob, of course, who had the dream of the ladder or the vision and climbing this ladder, or the ladder symbolically representing the movement higher. And the idea that it's a ladder is the idea that in order to reach for the next rung, you have to let go of the lower rung. So that always there's a releasing and letting go of something in your life, it seems, in order to reach for what's next. And there's also the story of Moses, who we can all relate to. I always have. Moses had three distinct phases in his life, and one was where he was pulled out of the river, was brought up in royalty and manhood, and the palaces of Egypt, where he was a Hebrew, but Egyptians were, over the Hebrews as slaves, and so he always knew he was a Hebrew. And he met force with force one day because one of the Egyptian guards were beating one of his people, a Hebrew person, a slave. And he ended up killing that person. And he had to flee. And that was his first segment of his life, where he met force with force and had some things to learn. He went out into the desert, and he was a shepherd, and he was tending sheep. And during that time, he was able to really cool his jets a little bit. He was able to meditate and be reflective and do prayer and get in touch with another dimension of his being. And as that process was happening, he was becoming readied for what was next. And that next step, that third phase, was initiated in what is called, or that experience of the burning bush. However you think of it, it was simply a burning desire that was coming and being given to him, even though he didn't feel he was up to it. And many of us are sometimes given something to do, and we don't feel necessarily that we're ready, or a little concerned or afraid. And so he felt uncertain about God asking him to lead the people to freedom out of Egypt. He felt inadequate and unable to do what he was called to do. And so he said, who am I to do this? And he said, I'm not eloquent, I'm slow of speech, I'm this, I'm that. And that's part of the mind of the lower self, really, that wants to say we can't do it. But then the voice comes in, much as Emerson said, and that was pretty much God's response. It was similar to a quote that Ralph Waldo Emerson has shared, which is, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. And so God was giving him an answer in that moment that, I am there with you. I will be your voice. I will be with you. I will be within you. So whatever this next step you are called to, you're covered. We're together on this. The psalmist writes, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you shall go. It is that way. There's a deep knowing that can come to a person as to what is their next step and what it is they're being called to, if we're open and receptive to that. Guidance can come in the form of intuition. It can come in the form of a pull, a tug, an inner knowing, that still small voice, a sixth sense, a holy hunch, however you want to think of it, but it can be like a wave, like a surfer is riding this wave. And you have to catch the right wave and see that it has your name on it. And if you do, you start kind of moving with it a little bit, and then it picks you up and it takes you forward and ushers you forward, because you know that there's something in this wave that has somehow captured you with an idea, a next step, whatever it may be. And you surrender to it and you take the ride, and you become one with the wave. And it can be like that. And there are times when, the vibration of what we're being asked to do defies logic. And there was a family that went on a day's trip into nature and into the country to spend a picnic and do some hiking. And most of the ride was about an hour on highway, and then finally they took a road, went into side roads out into the country, and they had their picnic. And when the day was over and they were ready to go home, the wife said, I'd like to take a more scenic road or route home. And the husband said, I'm kind of tired, I'd like to get home. And she said, well, I just feel like, something inside really would like to see the scenery, and we need to go that route. And so he conceded, and they went that route. And when they got home that evening, they saw on the news that there was a semi-trailer truck that had flipped over on the highway that they would have taken if they went back the way they had come, and that both lanes were shut down, and that basically people were stalled for hours and hours in getting home. But they got home in 2 hours, and it was a scenic ride. But it again just shows you that sometimes there are inner promptings that we need to follow, and this lady did. And it's like Proverbs that says, when wisdom enters into your heart and knowledge is pleasant to your soul, discretion shall preserve you, and understanding shall keep you. There's something that sometimes touches us at a heart level. We feel there's something more than us that is moving us, and that's something that you can develop. Adyashanti, who is a wonderful author and spiritual teacher, writes about this, and he says, you have to become more interested in the silent background than in the foreground. The foreground being the phenomena, the thoughts, the emotions, the sounds, the smells, all of that. He says most people are focused on the foreground of the five senses, but the self, capital S, the real self, the true self, the higher self, the you is discovered in the background. When you rest in the background, you can taste yourself. There is a self of you that is meant to be tasted and experienced and lived from. He says the insecurity of the unknown is the very thing that you don't want to avoid. Within the insecurity, within the unknown, is the mystery that lies the fulfillment of all seeking. Total security actually rises out of total insecurity. You have to push through. Everything that you want in life lies on the other side of the fear and the discomfort that you think you have to go through. We often talk ourselves out of a feeling. And there was one guy that actually put that to the test. And what he did was for a while, he would go to parties and gatherings, and if there were people maybe he didn't know, and he'd try it on just a few people, he'd go up and ask them what time it was, and they'd tell him the time, and then he'd say, oh, I have 15 minutes ahead of that, or he would tell his time. And he said, by and large, 80% of the people would doubt their watch. They would doubt themselves before doubting him. And that's our first tendency, is what he was saying. Everything is vibrating. We're all vibrators. We're all vibrators. I love Panache Desai. That's what he said. We're all vibrators in life. Actually, every person has a vibration that is unique and distinct to them, much as a fingerprint, because you are a unique consciousness. You have a unique vibration. It is unique unto you. And so people can sometimes become sensitive, in which they will actually come to read whether or not you're happy or unhappy or sad or agitated or angry, or whether you're feeling weak or strong. Basically, we can pick that up. Our energy fields overlap as well. There is the example of similar to two guitars laid next to each other, and you strum the one string, and the note from the one guitar all of a sudden begins to vibrate at the same on the other guitar. We're like that. Everything is vibration. You know, some people are very attuned into the energies and vibrations of whatever is going on, even close or at a distance. Sonia Choquette, in her book, tells a very interesting example of this. Her mother was very astute and intuitive and would pick up energies and vibrations. And one time on a winter evening, her brother, Neil, Sonia's brother, went to visit, to see a concert with some friends. And it was like in some mountainous area, and it was winter, and it was snowing. It was an hour's drive. And anyway, at 1 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang, and the father answered, and it was the police. And they said that there had been an accident, and that he had been injured severely. He was in the hospital, and that they had found his driver's license in the pocket of his coat, and so it was Neil. And so he was very upset and hung up, and told his wife, we need to go to the hospital. And the wife got very frantic, the mother, and then all of a sudden a calm came over her. And she said, it's not him. It's not him. And the father said, what? They have his driver's license. They just called. He's in the emergency room. Get going. Get dressed. We're going. And she said, no, it isn't him. I can feel his vibration. He's perfectly well. And so the father continued to get dressed and was ready to go, and the phone rang again. And it was Neil. It was Sonia's brother. And he said, hey, Dad, I'm at the hospital. I'm fine. But there was an accident that took place in front of us. And on our way home, the driver lost control, swerved off, collided with an oncoming car. And we stopped to help the people until the police arrived. The father said, but they told us it was you, that they had your driver's license. And he said, no, Dad, it wasn't me. I put my jacket over the guy until the police arrived. So my wallet and driver's license were in my pocket of the coat. Father hung up, told the mom, and the mom smiled and then began to sob in gratitude that it wasn't his vibration. We can hear the phone ring and sometimes know who it is, don't we? We can be in a car driving along and have some topic come into mind that it was far out from what was being talked about, and the other person, just as we're opening our mouth, brings that topic up. Has that ever happened? It has. So what are some steps that would be important for all of us in terms of taking the next step? One, it would be good, certainly, to simply take a next step in being a loving person. That's what we're here for. That's our true reality. There is various levels of love. There was a bumper sticker I saw once that said, make love, not war. See driver inside for details. And then we love Tina Turner, you know. What's love got to do with that? Not a very good, I know, but my answer to that is everything. Everything, you know. I'd like to shout that back at her. She's wonderful. But Paul's treatise on love, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. At the end it says faith, hope, love abide, but the greatest of these is love. People miss the next verse after that passage. And what it says is make love your aim. In other words, make that your next step, okay? Make that your next step. Another good next step is really the idea of commitment. For many, commitment is not comfortable. Commitment is easy when it's easy. And mediocrity of life is really of the uncommitted. Status quo is safe. It's easier, but avoids the next step. Very little progress is made unless a person has commitment, lives commitment. And one cannot be sort of committed. That's not commitment. Of Course in Miracles has a line that says, one cannot be committed sometimes. I had a sign on my desk for years. I had my desk in the tower before we moved. It was right there every day. One cannot be committed sometimes. Always calling me to try to be committed. And so you look at those people who've done great things, and it's because somehow or another they were able to take the next step, even when it was hard, when it was difficult, when things weren't going well. You read their biographies and you see they had a mission or a vision or a something that was pushing them. And out of that dedication and commitment, they realized great things. Wernher von Braun to John Kennedy. When John Kennedy asked Wernher von Braun, what will it take to put a man on the moon and bring him back safely? He said 5 words. Wernher von Braun said, the will to do it. The will to do it. If you have the will to do it, you have the will to take the next step, to follow the guidance that Spirit may be leading you to. There will be many steps in between, perhaps. It may not be all easy, but there's some wave that has hit you to take you on that next ride. And so, what is the next step in your life? What is it that you're being called to? You know, there's a story about that was out years ago, and it's a true story, and it was told about a man that was hired to assist a large supermarket chain and lead the customer service program to build customer loyalty. And that was what he was there for. And this consultant came and gave a speech and said, every one of you can make a difference and create memories for your customers that will motivate them to come back. Great memories. He said, put your personal signature on that job. Think about something you can do for that customer to make them feel special, a memory that will make them want to come back. So about a month later, he received a call, the consultant did, from this guy, which was a 19-year-old bagger named Johnny. And Johnny proudly informed him that he was a Down syndrome individual, and went on to share that he had liked what this consultant had to say that day, but he didn't think that he had anything special that he could give the customers. But after all, he said, I'm just a bagger. And then he went on to say, but then I had an idea. Every night after work, I would come home and find a thought for the day. And if I can't find a saying that I like, I make one up. And so when I have a good thought for the day, my dad has helped me, and he runs off copies, and what he did was he signed the back of each of these, or he'd cut them out, and then he would bring them to work the next day. And Johnny told him on the phone that when I finish bagging somebody's groceries, I put my thought for the day in their bag, and I say, thanks for shopping with us. And the man was touched by that, and here this young man was able to make an important decision, take a step in creating precious memories for these customers. Anyway, a month later in this story, the manager called the consultant, and the manager said to the consultant, you won't believe what has happened. When I was making my rounds today, I found Johnny's checkout line was 3 times longer than anyone else's. It went all the way back to the frozen food aisle. And I quickly announced for more checkers to come and spread them to other lanes. I tried to get people to change lanes, but they would not move. They said, no, it's okay, we want to be in Johnny's lane. We want his thought for the day. After a few months, the store manager called the consultant again, said Johnny has transformed the store. Now when the floral department has a broken flower or an unused corsage, they look for an elderly person or a little girl to pin on in the store. People are doing things to make people feel special, and people are wanting to come back. People who've been shopping once a week or once every 2 weeks, we're seeing them in there daily because they want a thought for the day. They want to feel the energy. It's what it's about. Johnny was able to take the next step. There are lots of ways that we can enter into taking the next step. You know, just be creative, be open, be receptive, be willing, be guided, Be the love that you are created to be. Be committed. Listen to your higher self. It's all there. You know, I'm being guided to take a next step. And so it's interesting that I really humanly thought I was leaving or planning to leave in September of 2018. But actually, the wave hit me that said, no, your wave has your name on it now. And it's September 2017. And I'm just, sad that I'm leaving a year earlier, but I'm glad that I have had the sensitivity to feel the clarity that this is the time, that it's complete. And I came across a banner that says, collect moments, not things. And so I've collected many precious memories and moments here. And I'm taking the next step, and Reverend Michael is taking the next step. You as a ministry are taking the next step. This is a wonderful spiritual community. There are many more memories and moments to be created. It'll take commitment. It'll take coming together. It'll take people like Johnny the Bagger, who really believes that a difference can be made and an energy created that makes people want to come together. That's what people said. I'm so glad I found this place. There were people that cried for weeks, good cries, to have found their spiritual home. It's a beautiful thing to hear that, We know that there is that passage in Ecclesiastes where it says all of us are to everything there is a season, a time to every purpose, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to keep and a time to release. Verse 11 in that passage says, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has put eternity in their hearts. Verse 14, nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it. So I have a collection of moments and memories that I am taking with me. Diane and I are taking with me. I hope you do too. And I hope that God has moved through me, Diane, to help put a bit of eternity in your hearts. I hope that it has for you as it has been for me. It's been wonderful, beautiful, perfect, that really nothing can be added to it and nothing taken away from it as it stands. It is perfect, it is done, it is complete. Praise God. Let us all take the next step into God's glorious good. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.